my warriors striking by depression. My name is Anna of Northern Germany, and now it's Northern Germany again. And half an hour ago there was sun, and I wanted to greet us with another day of sun, Northern Germany, but it didn't happen. And yesterday, and the day before yesterday. Yeah, Northern Germany is Northern Germany, but it doesn't matter. Today, I remind you that I am Anna, originally from Russia, living in Northern Germany, diagnosed with depression, and an amateurish writer, a beginner writer, and also a very, very big book lover. And today I brought you this amazing book, Sylvia Plath, The Bell Jar. And it was interesting for me. The literature about depression, not like scientific literature, but fictional literature where some kind of depression is described of the character. And I decided that it's very important to look at the experience of other people. And also, I'm very curious what it was to have depression 100 years ago, 200 years ago, or whatever. And here we're talking about 1950s, late 1950s, 1960s, something like that. So kind of modern times, but not exactly modern. And I want to discuss what is going on in this particular book. And a bit of warning, first of all, spoilers. If you haven't read this book, maybe it's time to read it, and then we will discuss it. Then you'll return to this video if you want to. And also trigger warning, because yeah, unfortunately Sylvia Plath ended her life, and also yeah, depression can be very triggering, and I also had problems with my will to live, so to say, not to trigger people with big words, the words that we all know. And yeah, if you don't feel super comfortable, don't watch it. But if you're curious like me, let's pass over to the Bell Jar novel. Should we put up the candle? Maybe. For what we're putting up the candle today? Well, always for Russia, for democracy in Russia, please, and for peace on earth. I think it's important. Yeah, so I suggest starting first with the character and how it all starts. The main character is called Esther. Sorry. English is not my native language. I remind it to myself always. Esther. And she's 19 at the beginning of the book. She turns 20. And yeah, from the very beginning we realize that something is wrong. That something at least is going to be wrong. But at the beginning she's holding it together. And it often happens that depression, being not treated, is aggravating with the course of time. And here she has several triggers. Yeah, she lives in 1950s, 1960s, and she's having this internship in New York, and it doesn't help, and she doesn't know what she wants to do in the future. At the same time, she realizes that she was super good at winning scholarships and being a star at studying, somewhere being evasive with the studying, somewhere, yeah, pretending that she's studying. And the time is passing, and she's about to finish university, and she doesn't know what she wants to do. And people around also encourage you. Her editor, let's call her like this, she says, yeah, you don't speak languages, you don't do this, you don't do that. And eventually she tells her that she won't go far like this without knowing what she actually wants to do. At 19, I remind you, the main character is 19. And yeah, she is plunged into this self-doubt, as I had already mentioned in my previous videos, that yeah, what I heard, the self-doubt is one of the triggers for the depression, self-hatred that is turned against you. And yeah, so she has a long list of the things that she cannot do, and she cannot cook, she cannot clean, whatever, she cannot type, or like past typing, whatever it was, like something from the past. I forgot what it is called, but my grandmother used to do this too, and it was apparently very popular in the 60s. And yeah, in addition, men are being men in the novel, especially these are 1960s, and men are being men at the top of their mannery. If we say like this, so they are disgusting. And eventually it all sums up, it all culminates at the point that she doesn't get another course, another scholarship, and she's done. She's done. She is getting into this depression, which is very sad because, yeah, her symptoms are basically standard symptoms for depression. She says that she cannot sleep, she cannot read, she cannot eat, she doesn't really see a point of getting up, dressing up, all our favorite symptoms, just 10 out of 10. And she also tries to do something. She starts a novel, she starts shorthand writing, maybe it is what it is called, and she gives up, and yeah, she feels pretty miserable, as we all do when our depression is like in its worst. And then we pass over to the most interesting part, the part with treatment, how she was being treated, her depression. I will say, like, from the very beginning, I rate this 1 million breakdowns from 10, and I don't want to experience that. I think her behavior, and she commits to end her life. Who speaks like that? After one of the treatment attempts, and I think that was quite reasonable, that was quite explainable, because it was just horrible. Basically, she meets 3 doctors, plus or minus, or let's say 2 doctors. First, that was a doctor in her local place, in the place where she was living, somewhere near Boston. And he implemented shock treatment, and he saw her once, he saw her twice, and when he asked her for the second time, how do you feel? And she said, I am not better. And he was like, what? You're not better? I think basically what is going on in this book, they are trying to convince her that she is playing dumb and her depression is going on in her head. That's why they do something just for her to think, okay, well, actually, I'm not that bad anymore. It doesn't work like that. Unfortunately, fortunately, I don't know. Maybe fortunately. And yeah, he implemented the shock therapy. I can put the pictures of shock therapy. If simplified, it's like when you are shocked with electricity, and normally you should be put into sleep, but this doctor just didn't bother himself, and she just feels as if her bones are about to break. Amazing feeling. And after that she decided that she didn't want to live anymore. I wonder why. And she attempted on her life, and then she survived, and she ended up in another local hospital, not a private hospital, and there she's been treated super badly by the doctors. They are saying like, yeah, you will end up you know where, they will treat her you know where, you are misbehaving, you're this, you're that. Person who is having depression, and they treat her pretty badly. And this is sad, because when you're having depression, you need support. You need to be wrapped in love, because these things that are going on in your head, they're so strong. And also what she points out, Esther, that she wished to have at least fever, at least something. She always measured her temperature, because when there is something wrong with your body, it's much easier to handle when there is something wrong with your mind. And it's also quite reasonable. And yeah, and eventually she ends up in a private hospital, and with the help of her scholarship madam, the person who granted her scholarship. And there it's slightly better. There they have this various buildings for like very bad, very insane, crazy frogs. A bit better. There she met a person who had undergone lobotomy. Also another way of treatment of your mental illness. I investigated a bit, and basically it was the best cure for anger. And basically everyone could have been diagnosed with anger. Every woman, just do a lobotomy to her, because why not? And also she went through insulin shock. It's basically when you get a shot of insulin, and what I searched for it on Google, and what I discovered, that it actually proved to be very dangerous, and you are supposed to have some kind of reaction, and it was misunderstood and misinterpreted, and doctors used to think that this reaction was a positive reaction, although those were irreversible changes in your brain. Perfect. And it all finishes at her doctor, Esther's doctor, who first seemed quite alright. It finishes at her lying to Esther, because she had promised her to tell her in advance that if she is sent to a shock therapy, her doctor had promised to her to tell her in advance, because she had a bad experience. She didn't enjoy the first shock treatment, and she wanted to be warned. And the doctor had promised her that she would warn her in advance. And what happens? Esther wakes up in the morning and she doesn't get her breakfast. And what she says at that particular moment, that she was kind of fine with her not getting better, and she was just trying to get some comfort from her food, from her small pleasures, and she was craving a cup of coffee. And then she doesn't get her cup of coffee because the patients who undergo this shock treatment, they don't get breakfast. And Esther realizes that this morning she's going to get the shock treatment. And only after that her doctor came to her and said, well, I'm telling you now. Yeah, I know I had promised you to tell you in advance, but you wouldn't sleep at all. I know that you wouldn't sleep. Of course you wouldn't sleep, my darling. As a former teacher, I can tell you, it's also the same about doctors, teachers, parents. If you promise something, if it is a test, or to give some information, or to buy something, or not to buy something, or whatever, do it. You think that the child is stupid, but they would remember, or any other person, especially an adult person, they would remember. You would just lose your trust. Despite the fact that book finished on a positive note, I was still quite heartbroken having read this book. Because let's put it that way. I have an impression that all the doctors in this book in 1960s, maybe, I think antidepressants were already introduced around that time, but I feel like all the doctors that I saw, that I read about in this book, they all succeeded in helping her, kind of, only because depression doesn't last forever. I have a sticker on the wall for me to remember that, because depression might come in a wave and usually doesn't last forever. It finishes at one point, it might start again in waves, and yeah, eventually Esther got better by herself, succeeding not to end her life tragically. However, we can see in the book that there is her friend, not exactly friend, Jane. She wasn't that successful, and many people in this book, despite that Esther used to feel the worst case there, we realize that many people, they get better and then they return. They might get better and get to one house, then they return to the building for the worst cases, because yeah, this is how depression might develop, and they might be triggered also by the treatment. And the treatment, lobotomy, shock therapy with electricity. For the second time she was put into sleep, and it was more successful. But still, her doctor lied to her. I didn't like it at all. And insulin shock. That is basically destroying your brain. Well done. 10 out of 10. Curing depression in the past. I wouldn't want to experience that. I'm glad to live in the 21st century with all these problems of the century and get my treatment, and also not to be treated gingerly by people around me who knows that I have depression, because I always speak openly that yeah, I'm diagnosed with depression. And yeah, I guess that's it. The book is recommended. It's a very good book. It's very sad that Sylvia Plath didn't write more novels, unfortunately. That's why it's very important also to get acquainted with this book if you have depression, and with other books that I will also want to skim and to discuss on my channel. And I wish you, if you struggle from depression right now, gute Besserung. So this is a good German phrase. Good improving, literally. And I send you rays of support, and from my dear brain in northern Germany, and I wish you love, love and peace. Peace. Bye. If I was the main character of this book, which I pretty much don't want to be, I think I would beat this doctor who put her to shock therapy without putting her to sleep. And maybe I would be lobotomized, because I would be so aggressive. I would bite, I would kick, I would scream, and it would end very badly for me. But this is what they deserve. I hope they have a separate cauldron in hell for all these doctors who treated depressed people like this, and in certain places still continue to treat them like this. Peace.